Hello, this is WCCX Waukesha 104.5 FM, and this is D&D with B&D, saying a lot to nobody.
So, Bradley, this is Drew Sherrod and Bradley Weller, by the way, coming at you to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, pretend that our love for one another is only platonic, and just all together make fools of ourselves constantly.
Of course.
So, Bradley, last week we found something out pretty weird.
What?
Not that you weren't on the right mic. We found that out in the middle of the thing. I shouldn't say in the middle.
We did?
It was like 10, 20 minutes before we finished.
10.
At least 50 minutes into the radio show.
Yeah.
But no, we found something out that was even more crazy, is that people were listening to our radio show.
What?
Yeah. I mean, you were there as well, Bradley. But
I was?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's almost as if we planned how we were introducing ourselves
It's like I'm
today.
doing this for comedic effect.
All right, so we walked out like 50 feet from the building where we broadcast this from, and not 50 feet from the building, someone calls out to us and says that their friend was listening to our podcast and really liked it, and they asked us what it was about, and we said Dungeons and Dragons, and they were like, "Oh, awesome! I'm gonna listen in."
What?
So, and I for a fact, Bradley, that they weren't the only ones, because I got told by other people that they were also listening, which is absolutely terrifying.
That is insane.
And what's crazier than that? Not necessarily crazier than that, because I mean, it's crazy enough that anyone was listening. But what's a little more crazy is that there are more people, apparently, who will be listening tonight.
No.
Including my mother.
Oh, my God.
Who, I mean, she tried to listen last time, to be fair, but couldn't find it. I mean, and it's fair. I mean, she deserves to know how disappointed she should be.
Of course, as a good parent should be.
So yeah, I don't
know what to do with this.
Well, I had an idea, Bradley. I think I know exactly what we should do with this information. What we should do is we should just give up. Like, stop the recording right now, end the conversation.
That sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
Just before we make fools of ourselves, you know?
I could play a PSA while we leave?
Yeah.
Should I go and try to do that now?
Sounds
all
great.
right.
Awesome.
High school. Let's listen to a PSA.
Fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
I'm a 40-year-old man. All right, so, Drew, we talked during the PSA.
Yeah, we talked a little bit, and we decided that we are going to continue doing this. Because
for some reason.
We did agree to do it, I guess.
I guess we
but
did.
The thing is, we're going to try not to make fools of ourselves.
Yeah, that sounds...
I mean, we're going to fail in like 5 minutes or so.
Oh, 100%.
We can at least try to do that.
Yeah, we can.
So we need to come up with something here, though, because we can't... Last time, we kept saying we were talking to nobody, and we can no longer say that, but
because people are listening.
Yeah, people are listening, but it is relevant in some ways, because people are probably going to turn this off in like 10 minutes, and then we will be talking to nobody. But I came up with a solution.
A solution?
We can still say nobody.
We can?
Yeah, we can still say nobody, because I think we can come up with a name for our audience. I think we call our audience Nobody. So that way, if we say nobody, we could be talking to our audience. And I mean, we are talking to audience, but we're not wrong in saying nobody. And if nobody is listening, which is far more likely, then we're not wrong there either. We can't be wrong if we say the nobody listening.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea to me.
I think it sounds awesome.
Yeah?
So, by the way, just to catch people up, my name is Drew Sherrod. I'm one of your hosts for the D&D with B&D show. I am a senior at Carroll University, and I am a religious studies major studying to be a pastor. Bradley, who are you?
I'm Brad. I'm a sophomore at Carroll University, and I study music, theater, arts management, performing arts stuff.
You sounded really sad when you said that, Brad.
I'm Brad.
So Bradley, before we want to talk about abilities today, like we
abilities
said in our original sketched out plan for our series.
We made a plan.
Yes, we announced it on air, Bradley. So
solid.
If we screw it up, the audience of nobody will also know we screwed up.
Oh my god.
Of course, we might have to change it sometimes, but anyway. But before we get into ability scores and Dungeons and Dragons in general, I so rarely get to see you besides for this and Dungeons and Dragons when we play it.
Yeah.
It essentially runs our entire lives. So I just wanted to say, how was your day?
My day was fine.
That's good.
Saw a jazz concert.
I know your day yesterday was great because you posted about it on
God
Facebook.
love social media.
Yeah. I love that you felt the need to post that this was a good day.
So Facebook I use as a public journal. It sounds like a terrible idea. But now we're getting into my personal life. And
well, I mean, I don't use it at all. So I mean, I use it.
I mean,
to
you
talk to
advertise
other
the
people.
show.
That's true.
I should have shared
use
that
it to advertise the show.
I should share that right now.
Which is probably why there's actually more than nobody listening.
What?
Which is fascinating.
Insane.
I don't know how that happens still, because nobody on my Facebook page probably cares. But that's still. But my day was phenomenal, by the way. Since you didn't bother
Excuse
to
me.
ask me.
I was going to ask once I felt a natural lull in the conversation.
Of course you were, Bradley. Of course. You care very much about me.
I am socially able, I swear.
Socially capable? Yeah.
Able. Yeah.
Socially handicapped?
I mean, we are talking about D&D.
That's fair. I mean, that's how our lives are run and how we interact in society in a weird way. So today we're talking about ability scores. What ability scores are. So first of all, to explain why we're talking about ability scores today is because half of our series, if you hadn't heard last time, we are devoting to kind of catching those players who want to play D&D up to other people. There will still be information that is relevant to veteran players or those who are at least a little bit experienced in Dungeons and Dragons, but we want to devote the first half of this season. We'll call it a season, I guess. For this season is this semester. First half of it to kind of I lost track of my mind.
To informing new people on how the game of D&D runs, so that people
how to build their first character, Bradley.
Oh, of course.
Our fifth show will be building.
It's not like that. There are countless YouTube videos that are much more thorough and shorter than this, but.
Oh, I mean, I feel like we're going to be far more thorough, Bradley, just way less short.
A lot more comedic. Actually, yeah.
That's very fair. So the ability scores of your character are your essentially what you want to start with once you have your race and class kind of chosen. But we'll get to race and classes are a whole thing of themselves.
It's a whole
that need their own discussions, and those will be our third and fourth shows. But ability scores. There are 6 ability scores, and those ability scores make up essentially the different
attributes,
like
strengths and weaknesses,
the different abilities of your character, you might say.
Basically,
so
it's
some of them are physical, and some of them are more mental variants. So there are 6 stats, and those stats are strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom,
and then charisma.
And charisma.
There's an order for some reason. I just go with it.
Which that screws me up so much because when I played with my father, we ordered it weirdly. We did strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma, and that's the way I've always known it forever. That's the way I've always ordered it. Even in my class files, you'll see that strength is on top, and then intelligence classes, and then wisdom classes, and then dexterity classes. But I like it. Because it has its own rhythm to it. It spells something out. Rory and I, my brother, I can say his name on air. He's my brother. We
All right.
Instead of saying ability scores, we always called it Sudkoch. Siwdcoch. Sudkoch. Doesn't mean anything. It's just a weird word we made up to describe it.
Drew, we're supposed to explain things to people, not make them more confused. I am very confused.
It's the initials, Bradley. It's not that confusing. It's really not.
I'm easily confused.
But anyway, so there are many models to go about explaining the abilities in depth. A very basic model that we'll start by describing is the tomato model.
Tomatoes, they're okay.
Tomatoes are, sure.
Yeah, they're okay.
So with a tomato, you can use your 6 attributes in many ways with a tomato. Strength is
how far you can throw a tomato if you ever need to throw a tomato. Imagine you're seeing like a terrible play and it's like some gesture insulting. You just want to throw a tomato at him, but it's far away.
Hurt a lot.
You want to hurt the man. So
Which is kind of the opposite of the point of them. They were not supposed to be meant to hurt, but
you
anyway.
just yeet this tomato at him.
God, no.
Okay. You throw this tomato at this person, and strength is like how far and how hard.
Yeah, how
hit.
hard it is. Dexterity, then. Dexterity is you can throw the tomato as hard as you want, but you need to be able to actually hit the gesture. It can't just hit the floorboard and the floorboard miraculously comes up and strikes the guy in the chin or something. Yeah. You need to hit the guy, and dexterity is kind of your accuracy with throwing a tomato. But also, it's a lot of other things too.
Dexterity is also being able to like move and dance and dodge a tomato if it's being thrown at you.
Indeed. The same way it gets thrown at you. A lot of actors need good dexterity. Not usually these days, but
back in the day.
Constitution
is being able to Constitution is like health and things, so it's being able to eat like a rotten or poisoned tomato.
I don't know why you would do that, but sure.
Maybe because you don't notice it. But like eating like a terrible tomato.
Wisdom then.
Stop confusing things. Eating like a bad
tomato. You don't need
tomato.
wisdom if you've got Constitution for day. If you can survive anything, you don't need to notice anything.
Exactly.
If an arrow's coming at you, it's fine. Whatever. I'll just take it.
So I made a character kind of revolving around this idea. He died in like 5 minutes.
So yeah, Constitution is like surviving.
Endurance.
It's like endurance, essentially.
Yeah.
If you play like Fallout, endurance is the basic contributor, replacement to Constitution.
Yes.
Then there are the mental stats. So intelligence is the basic one. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone knows what intelligence means just from hearing the word. But intelligence in D&D is essentially knowing what a tomato is,
knowing facts,
and knowing that a tomato is a fruit.
Yes, knowing tomato is a fruit.
I don't know why I hesitated with that.
Intelligence also talks about facts and book smarts and like learned knowledge, like college kids forcing
intelligence knowing a tomato is a fruit. But wisdom is thinking about things on a more fundamental or philosophical level.
Or noticing
with intelligence, you know that a tomato is a fruit, but with wisdom, you know that does not mean that a tomato would be good in a fruit salad. That it doesn't work.
Yeah. Also, wisdom.
It's thinking on about things in a bigger picture sort of way.
Yeah,
so to speak.
And wisdom also is noticing details.
Yeah,
in things.
And we'll get more into each of these individuals.
Imagine being handed a poisoned tomato.
Wisdom is the most complicated of the 6 stats. We'll talk about it more when we get to it.
Like you can notice if the tomato was poisoned or not with wisdom.
Yeah.
I was trying to make an overarching story true. I'm sad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Charisma.
Ooh.
Charisma.
What is that?
Charisma is talking to people. So charisma would be trying to be able to sell a tomato-based fruit salad.
Yeah. Or being able to sell a tomato.
Yeah.
Or being able to deceive someone into eating a poisoned Tomato.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow, it's come almost full circle.
Yeah. We lost the gesture arc, but we got this poison tomato now.
Poison tomato fruit salad.
Yum.
That's the worst thing I've heard all day. You know how I said it was phenomenal?
Yeah.
I think it just went downhill after that.
I think that was the best thing I heard all day, Drew.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty sad.
I mean, I heard a lot of jazz. Good music.
I feel it's sad for you.
It's okay.
So, diving into these for a little more detail. Strength, first of all.
All right.
Oh, Bradley, whoopsie-daisy. I actually
Whoopsie.
have these organized in accordance to my version of going.
Why? Why?
I'm sorry. That's how we're going to do them now. We're going strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma. Yeah. All right, so strength. So D&D is a lot of times about fighting. It doesn't have to be, as we discussed a lot last time. It can be political intrigue or
Mystery.
or
horror.
or anything like that. But strength basically in a typical Dungeons and Dragons game is how you it affects how you physically attack things. So it's more useful to like warriors and those who fight up close to things. Though it should be noted that in 3.5, which I cut this out of my 3.5 games because it's ridiculous. It's kind of dumb. In 3.5, damage for thrown weapons and for arrows is also strength-based because it's based on, like, pulling back a heavy bowstring and stuff.
So weird.
Which is just weird.
Also,
it should be based on dexterity, which we'll get to later.
Also, I want to remind nobody that there are several different versions of D&D. Mainly, we'll be talking about 3.5, 4E, and 5E.
Mostly 3.5 and 5E, but a little bit of 4E.
Yeah, just so that people have context. We'll explain additions later on. But
yeah, we have an entire radio show dedicated
an entire
to
episode
talking about out the different editions. But we just want to not leave anything out for those who might be playing different editions. So it is important to know if you're playing 3.5 and you're playing it in the base style, which I would recommend modifying it a little bit to make it dexterity. But if you're playing it in the base style, damage for ranged weapons is strength-based as well. But there are a number of skills in Dungeons & Dragons which are more specific, like, abilities, I guess. And different abilities affect these skills. So, like, strength affects, in 3.5, it affects your climbing skill, it affects your swimming skill, and it affects your jumping skill. 5e and 4e as well kind of just
clump all of those together.
Those three things into one thing. They make it the skill called athletics, which is just
simplified
climbing,
version.
swimming, and jumping all in one.
Yep.
Which I would argue doesn't make a lot of sense because just because you're good at climbing does not mean you're good at swimming. But
I would argue it simplifies things, but
sure.
This will be a small bit every time, I swear. Also, in 5e,
I just want to leap across the table and fight you.
I'll make an athletics check.
No, Brad, a jump check.
All right. Also, in 5e, strength allows you to be wearing like heavier armor, like jumping around in like full metal armor.
Which that is also true in 3.5. I just cut it out because, in my opinion, monitoring your armor and how much you can carry is rarely fun. So, I mean, I make people drop things if it's getting ridiculous that they're carrying. But
how many daggers was I holding one time?
There's no point.
I think like 20.
Yeah, but, well, it was far less than 20.
And then you made me drop some. It was fun. But
yeah, strength is essentially built a stat for tank classes. Like one of our characters, Vishal, is a warrior and has 22 strength, and he's ridiculous. And 22 strength might sound crazy to most people who are experienced in D&D because you probably experience 5e, which the cap is 20, where in 3.5 there is no cap. because there is no limit in 3.5.
Yeah, because everyone's a god.
Yeah, it's amazing, but it's really not that broken of a system. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time. Yeah, strength is for building tanks. It's or if you want to go into more specific things, strength is helpful for if you want to build a swimming mace character or a climbing mace character,
or just tons of damage.
Yeah, it's
have a sword, get them a lot.
Yeah,
have a hammer,
especially if you're wielding something two-handed, which will deal even more damage based on your strength.
In 3.5.
In 3.5, is that not true in 5e?
I don't think so.
No, but there's great weapon master,
there's
abilities,
weird things.
stuff. Like, there's combat features in some other classes.
There is.
That are weird. Yeah.
It is weird.
They're not that weird, but...
I like them.
They're okay.
But anyways, I think we talked about being swole enough.
I should make a note right now, even though this isn't what today's podcast is about necessarily.
I don't have any paper.
That 5e is my second favorite edition. I do love 5e a lot, but 3.5 is better.
5e is better. 3.5 is my second favorite edition.
Moving on to intelligence.
I'm Brad.
Because we're not going through the physical stats first. Intelligence is the other one that's pretty basic. Strength and intelligence are the easiest to understand. Intelligence is just knowing things and knowing facts. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a good tactician or anything. Tactics, I feel like, involves wisdom just as much as it involves intelligence.
It's a mix of both.
In many ways.
That is for sure.
But intelligence is an interesting stat. In 3.5, intelligence, not skill-wise, affects your skill points, because in 3.5 you get to invest skill points into certain skills, whereas in 5e you do not get to do that. You just choose the ones that you want initially, and they grow over time, which I don't think is a bad system, but if you want more complexity and choice in your character moving on, 3.5, you can kind of decide based on how things are going over time where you want to invest your stats.
Yes.
3.5 also, but the other thing in 5e, because it has you choose your skills initially, you don't have skill points to spend. So intelligence has very limited use in 5e.
Yeah, intelligence in 5e is kind of the worst stat unless you're casting magic.
Yeah, and 3.5 I would also argue that, honestly. Intelligence is
skill
in
points,
combat. Though. In combat, intelligence is statistically the most useless stat, in my opinion.
That is fair.
That doesn't count in if you want to use tactics, but I would argue that's more of like melding of role play and battle stuff. It's not statistics based.
Yes.
Even charisma, you can use intimidate checks or persuasion checks or diplomacy checks in 3.5 to try and change the outcome of the battle. There are not as many things that intelligence can do in the middle of a battle. Most of the noticing things around the battle can be done by perception checks, which is wisdom based and stuff like that. So intelligence has very little place in combat, but I would say it's very useful for role playing and stuff, and not mucking up where you guys are going or anything like that in D&D sessions.
Yes.
And I do say intelligence is the worst stat statistically. That is for the general adventurer, though. Mm-hmm. Because there are wizards which use intelligence in their spell casting.
And also knowing things is nice.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with like demons and daemons and knowing what they are instead of they just look scary.
Yeah. I mean, they do look scary either way, but...
Yeah. Also, did we explain skills too much?
With intelligence? Not really yet.
No, I mean, like, in general, because we explained ability scores, but, like, skills are things that you can, like, be extra experienced in, so it's...
Yeah, I mean, I explained them a little bit. There's not really a good way to explain them without...
going into
seeing them? They're just more specific abilities,
yes.
I guess, that the ability scores can affect.
Yes.
So, like, in 3.5... intelligence can affect your knowledge skills, which there are a number of knowledge skills, which I think are all important, and that's That's one thing I will say. I think 5e didn't have to cut down on is the knowledge skills, craft and spellcraft, which are good. I definitely think a lot of these can be simplified. There's only one skill in 3.5 that I think totally shouldn't have existed at all, though, and I'll get to that when we get to it.
Really?
Yeah, there's one.
I feel like I have points in that.
What's that?
Nah. Making a joke.
I don't think you do. I don't think
All
think anyone invested anything into it. There's appraise checks, and appraise checks are intelligence-based as well. I'm going through the intelligence-based skill checks. Appraise checks are just like knowing the value of something. So if you can tell if someone's trying to swindle you with a price they offer you. There's disable device checks, which that is... I really like disable device checks. They did away with these in 5e, but I feel like they give more value to rogues because disable device checks are almost exclusively used by rogues to like try and break traps and cause them not to work.
Yeah, like
function.
you're going into a temple and you step on a tile and poisonous darts comes shoot you.
Yeah, and I mean they
You'll be able to stop
kind of
that.
did it with 5e. It's a what is it? In 5e?
It is under thieves' tools.
Right.
It's
under-
dexterity now.
Yeah, it's under thieves' tools, which does give still specific stuff to rogues, but in that way, no one else can really even try it in 5e.
Yeah, only one background
Which
gives them.
I feel like
yeah.
you should be able to at least try it.
Multi.
If you invest skills into it, like anyone can do any skill if they work hard enough at it. And it doesn't matter what background or class you have, so to speak.
Well, we should talk about multi-classing later.
Oh my gosh. Are we really going to get into
Nope,
that?
not today. Not today.
But there's also in 3.5 there's forgery and decipher script, and I get asked by people all the time if I think forgery is useless. I think forgery is really cool. It's just
forgery's great.
It's just usually built for not a typical D&D session. Like if you're doing a political intrigue type of game, forgery is an awesome skill.
Okay.
It's really fun to play.
One thing I like about forgery is imagine you're at the DMV and you don't want to wait for the DMV, so you just make yourself papers.
So,
But imagine instead of having a car, you have skeletons.
so do you do you often try to use D&D to justify your crimes?
Plead the fifth.
Forgery and decipher script also isn't used in 5e or 4e. It's mostly, I guess, kind of replaced by linguistics, maybe?
No,
really know.
forgery is a hidden thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like it's a forgery kit, right? You
Yes,
can get a
forgery
kit.
Kits.
Right.
Kits are weird.
If you want to get really specific and find a forgery kit. And then 3.5 has search, which is replaced by investigation in 5e, and apparently not a thing in 4e.
Okay.
So search check there's a difference between search and perception checks. We'll get to perception checks when we talk about wisdom, but search check is when you're like hands-on trying to investigate something and look around for like traps and stuff. Like usually rogues use an investigation / search check.
/ getting good things.
I guess 4e doesn't have it. I assume they just use like perception instead, which perception is more of like
Noticing things?
passive noticing things around you. Sort of.
In 5e, investigation is more putting together clues to figure out details.
Right. But it also, it's a search check. I've seen it used as a search check, essentially.
Yeah. They're very similar.
Yeah.
It gets weird.
But I really wish I knew more about 4e. I wanted to look up more about 4e before coming on here today, because I do feel like I'm lacking in knowledge right now here. 4e is the worst edition in my mind. That includes old editions.
That includes
Pathfinder. But I still think there are elements of it that are good.
Yeah.
Small, rare elements.
4e was the first book.
I'm sorry to anyone who has exclusively played 4e out
Ed.
there. I know one of my friends exclusively played 4e before coming into our session. And, So the next ability score is wisdom. Now, wisdom is a weird ability. It's the most confusing ability, I guess, to people in some ways. It's essentially your philosophical outlook, your ability to know right from wrong. Now, having a high wisdom, you know right from wrong. That doesn't mean necessarily that you choose the right side. There are demons and devils that have super high wisdoms, and dragons and all sorts of things that have super high wisdoms. But it does allow you to kind of know the difference between things and be able to kind of look at perspectives as a bigger whole. Wisdom also affects your kind of passive knowledge about things. It's like perception in Fallout. You kind of notice things around you, essentially.
Like if you're in some kind of city and there's a pickpocketing people, perception, noticing details that something left your pocket.
Right.
That would be.
And the way I look at it,
like
there's the plan analogy for it. So like intelligence is being able to create a good plan, whereas wisdom, I feel like, is knowing whether the plan is good or not. Like, you can make a good plan, but it takes a wise person to kind of point out the small flaws in it sometimes. And, like, a wise person might be able to know whether a plan is good or not, and know whether it's going to screw you guys over in the future without being able to formulate it themselves. And you can have high wisdom while having very low intelligence. My character, Cowrun, had fairly high wisdom, not super high, but he had only 6 intelligence. But so he could know when a plan was a good plan, but if you tried to put him on the spot and make a plan, he had no idea what he was doing or anything about the nuances. Well, I shouldn't say that, because I like wisdom is more getting into the nuances of knowledge. Yeah. There are characters that are super intelligent that are not wise. For instance, I think you see that more commonly. I know one of my friends, Alistair, is very intelligent because they are really into they're a shipman essentially. They're a pirate technically, but they know how to work a ship. But they don't have very high wisdom. They don't know when to stop a fight and run away. Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you see more intelligent characters with low wisdom than you see wise characters with low intelligence. Because, to be fair, playing a wise character with low intelligence, I would say, is pretty hard in some ways.
Depends.
And sometimes it can be. I don't think you've really had any dichotomies of those two things.
I mean, I had I haven't had a dichotomy
because Verge was intelligent and wise.
Yeah.
And no, Simple Jeff is neither of the two. So
I mean, Simple Jeff is
he's a little more intelligent than
basic
wise.
Intelligence, but really not wise.
He knows how to farm.
He knows how to farm and take care of animals.
Yeah.
But yeah. Going into the skills that involve wisdom, there is heal. Under 3.5, there is heal, which is basically being able to apply bandages, make sure people don't die. The usual, typical doctor.
And 5e converted that into medicine, which I will say I like the name medicine better because it causes people to not... So, like, there are hit points in Dungeons & Dragons, and people see the word heal as a skill and think that they can heal hit points with the thing, which it's more based... heal and medicine is more for, like, helping ailments, like diseases and poisons and stuff.
Yeah.
I've made it in my game where it does heal a few hit points, very few hit points, but not by much.
Yeah.
But people always put a bunch into heal, and then they're like, okay, I try to heal him of damage. And I'm like, yeah, that's not how it works. I'm sorry. But then perception.
3.5.
3.5 has perception split into kind of 2 ability scores. Those are listen and spot, dividing it into the hearing sense and the seeing sense. I personally like that better because in my opinion, just because you're good at seeing something, again, doesn't mean you're good at listening and hearing something. 5e made it a little more simple and and 4e both kind of merged it into perception, which allowed them to be able to create passive perception, which I use passive perception anyway in the main game, in 3.5 game. But passive perception being that it's just things that you notice around you. Most of these skill checks involve making a roll, but with passive perception, you don't have to make a roll for it. It's just 10 plus your thing is your passive perception. And that's always the case. So if
it's a great way.
If something is under that roll around the area around you, you automatically notice it. You don't need to roll for anything.
It's a great way to see if the players will notice something and have something be there hidden that they don't know about.
You don't have to constantly ask players, hey, make a perception check here, because players are not going to think of that by themselves all the time. Mm-hmm. But there are more specific things that they can make perception checks for. Or spot checks.
Yep.
I changed my spot to saying perception in our main game, but
profession is under wisdom?
3.5 as profession, which profession is a weird one that I know people said they don't understand before in 3.5.
It's
basically just like all around
holding a job.
Yeah, any job you can find. Like for instance, you being a sailor. A lot of things about working a ship is based on profession checks, and there are more specific things that can be job related usually that require profession checks. It's weird. It's basically whatever the DM says is a profession check. It's hard to say what would qualify as a profession check. Mm-hmm. It's not used in 5e, and I can see why.
Yeah,
I really like it. For very specific games, but I can see why you might get rid of it. Yeah. One of the things that is not gotten rid of in 5e, which is a very often used one by players who are mistrusting of everything, is sense motive to insight in 5e. Sense motive is essentially knowing if someone's lying to you, or just kind of trying to get a gauge of their persona based on looking at them and watching their mannerisms.
Or if they have ulterior motives.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to tell you everything about their life story, but it's just kind of being able to see through their lies. And players use it all the time because dungeon masters are untrustworthy and they will lie to you constantly.
Oh, of course.
And so will other players. So
that's fun.
It's used on characters in the game, though. You can't make a sense motive check to check if your DM is lying to you.
I mean, that would be just a perception check.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah.
3.5 and 5e both also have survival as a thing.
Being able to survive in the wilderness.
Yeah, there's not much to explain about that. Being able to survive in the wilderness, being able to catch your own food over time and stuff. Mm-hmm. All these different things. Now, 5e and 4e did something weird. Actually, 5e didn't do it. 4e did something weird where, first of all, it doesn't have survival. It's the only of the three that doesn't have survival. I don't know why it doesn't have survival. I mean, you're always traveling as adventurers. I don't know why you wouldn't have survival.
4e is very gamey.
Maybe they use heal instead or something.
Maybe 4e is a gamey, so they think less on items.
Or they use a knowledge nature check, which this is weird about 4e. They make knowledge nature checks and knowledge dungeoneering checks wisdom-based instead of intelligence-based. Which is weird to me. It's also weird to me that they have dungeoneering as one of their few knowledge checks that they keep around. Because they have knowledge arcana, history, religion, arcana being magic stuff, dungeoneering and nature. But they don't keep, like... there was one I had one queued up in my head.
But Drew, this is Dungeons and Dragons. Aren't there a lot of dungeons? Like, you do it every
5e
level?
also only has 4 knowledge things, whereas 3.5 has like 12. You only have Arcana, so magic stuff, history, religion, and nature, which you incorrectly, by the way, have on our game sheets for the main game thing as nature being wisdom based. It's intelligence based.
But Drew, dungeons come up a lot. Wouldn't that be a popular thing for people to know about?
Yeah, but not a lot of things require a knowledge engineering check. There's very few things that's like knowing whether you're going to slip off this rock into the abyss, and that's about it.
Yeah, knowing walls.
Knowing walls, great. I really am going to put a lot of skill points into that one.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
It does help with like monsters that are typically only underground sometimes. But of the knowledge checks, I would say, I don't know why 4E kept that one around when it had others that it could have kept around that are more important.
Yeah. Well, we're halfway through the...
Right. I was about to mention that.
We're halfway through. We are halfway through the ability scores. Boy, I forget how to say things a lot of the times. So we're going to play our second PSA. That's, it's good to know things. So here we go.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the
Get some knowledge. Increase your intelligence with Feeding America. It's a great organization.
Wisdom by knowing what's right and wrong and feeding the kids of America.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Great times.
We didn't talk about will saves with wisdom, which is
We didn't
fine.
talk about any saves yet.
So like saves, in 5e you have 6 different types of saves.
Can we talk about saves at the end? Maybe after we go through the skills.
I mean, sure, I guess.
Okay.
We could also just talk about them as they come up, but okay.
It's 5e's weird.
Dexterity. So the next skill is dexterity, another physical stat for us. Dexterity. I can't say the first thing on the list of dexterity now because it's reflex saves, Bradley.
Okay.
You ruined everything.
I'm sorry for ruining your plan.
Okay,
this
so
is why
dexterity,
I don't make plans.
again, affects your dodging capabilities. So it affects your armor class, which is how easy it is to hit you. Other things affect that as well, mainly armor. But dexterity is a big one in affecting that. It also affects your ability to attack at range with like a bow or a spear or whatnot,
or
shurikens,
or some things that require more precision, like a duelist using a rapier or someone stabbing someone in the back with a knife. It gets complicated in 3.5, but 4E and 5E both allow dexterities for some, like, precise focused weapons in melee.
Dexterity is probably, statistically, for all characters,
I
would say probably in battle, statistically the best stat.
It is the best
to be honest.
So I
love all the stats, don't get me wrong, but dexterity is pretty good.
Everybody loves a good filthy dex build. Everybody loves a good filthy dex build.
So in 3.5, the third edition, if you hadn't caught on, you have dexterity put into a lot of things. One of those is balance and tumble. Balancing is balancing, and tumbling is kind of getting away from your enemies and stuff like that, and like general acrobatics. Those two things were combined in 5e and in 4e into acrobatics, just making them one thing, which is the usual simplification of that you'll find in 4e and 5e. There's also escape artists in 3.5, and that's like escaping from like in between bars or out of a net or something like that in 3.5.
In 5e, that is
also in acrobatics in 5e?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, like
squishing your body.
Escaping someone from holding you.
totally different from acrobatics, but whatever.
It's fine, Drew.
Oh wow, that laugh I could really hear for some reason.
That's because I speak specifically into the microphone.
Why can I hear you so much better now?
I don't know.
Anyway, 3.5 also have as hide and move silently, which is replaced by stealth in 5e. I prefer to have them as different things. Hiding is essentially being able to hide and stay still in one area, whereas move silently is when you're more proactively making a stealth check. It's when you're moving and stealthing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Hide is versus perception in 3.5, or spot in 3.5, whereas move silently is versus listen in 3.5. One of them can be seen and one of them can be heard, essentially, is the idea. And I like the division of them because, like, I've heard the argument before that you would essentially have the same thing in both stats. But in my mind, this is a supernatural world. All of the things you do are kind of supernaturally fueled. It makes sense to me that a 16-foot human would be able to stealth but not hide very well. They could be silent if they wanted to because it's a magical world. They can do whatever they want to do. If you invest in stealth, that's fine. Or move silently is what I mean. That's fine. 5e, Squish and 4e both squish it down into stealth, which is fine. 3.5 also has open lock, sleight of hand, and use rope, which I really wish they kind of split those up more in, or at least sleight of hand and open lock in 5e. But those are kind of
sleight of hand and open lock are different.
Oh, that's right, because you have a locksmith.
Thieves.
You have a specific tool set for
opening locks and disarming traps. Skill.
Again, in essentially saying that only thieves can do that, as opposed to everybody.
And one background. It's fine.
It's fine. It's a different system.
Job.
It's a different system. I understand.
It makes sense.
I swear. With open lock and sleight of hand and use rope to the one 3.5 skill that I think is absolutely useless and garbage and shouldn't be in any of the games, though. And it's use rope. It's so useless.
Use rope?
Make a sleight of hand check or make an escape artist check. But that's it.
But tying knots.
There's no specific.
Drew, you're a Boy Scout.
No one wants to.
Drew, you're a
no
Boy
one wants
Scout.
to waste time in D&D putting stuff into tying knots so they can tie a rope up better when they can just. That should just be sleight of hand.
But like, tying knots.
I was never good at tying knots in Boy Scouts. That was my worst.
That's why you hate it. That's why Drew hates it.
It's true. It's true. Eagle Scout. Not good at knots. Yeah, it was my worst skill in Boy Scouts. 3.5 also has ride for riding a horse or something.
Or a unicorn.
5e doesn't have that. I assume they just don't care to... I mean, there's not really... I can see why it's not... There's no really point to having it in some ways.
I think it's under handle animal.
That would make sense. But I like it in 3.5 because you can more specifically make a class built around riding an animal. 4E also, instead of sleight of hand, it calls all its stuff, open lock, sleight of hand, all that stuff, it calls it thievery. Which is a weird skill name. You hate 4E.
I really do. It was the first one I read, and I was like, D&D is interesting.
It's built for 4E. We'll get into it more in another day. But it's built for the gamer generation. It was a D&D game built for the gamer generation to kind of simplify it to an excruciating level for gamers, making challenge rating level and everything like that.
So I'm a storytelling boy. I mean, I like making games. Games are fun, but like stories are more than just statistics. Like statistics too.
Yeah,
but
yeah. I mean, I still think you can make a good story out of 4E sometimes. But anyway, 3.5. Moving on to
Constitution.
I'm sorry.
Constitution.
there's not a lot to talk about with Constitution. Constitution affects your hit points.
You're healthier.
Which is really important. You should never make Constitution your dump stat or the stat you
No.
make your
make
worst
it your
stat.
worst stat.
You can make it your worst stat, but you shouldn't
you shouldn't hate on it.
Yeah, you shouldn't hate
It's
on it.
it's
an important
important.
stat. It affects your hit points. It makes sure that you don't die
Immediately.
in the first game. It really doesn't affect any skills, except in 3.5 it affects concentration, which I can see why 5e got rid of.
It also
Well, it didn't fully get rid of it. But
yeah, it's weird.
It's
We'll
not a
talk about
skill.
it at the end. Yeah.
Concentration is essentially...
Being able to focus on a spell when someone stabs you with a knife.
Yeah, so it makes Constitution important for spellcasters in some ways.
Yeah.
Whereas usually they might not focus into that because they're already going to be weak and squishy. And then in 4e it's called Endurance. And I think that covers more than just concentration checks in 4e. I'm not really sure.
It's swimming and running.
It might be
on-
survival. We might have found out where survival comes into play.
I don't like it, Drew. Drew, I don't like it.
Sounds like we're a bit staticky. Are we clipping right now?
I think we're fine.
Okay. Maybe it's just my headset.
Yep.
I don't really want to talk about Constitution a lot because we need to move on to a big one, which is Charisma.
Yeet.
Charisma is your ability to talk to people and get around situations without resorting to violence most of the time. And there are 3 big stats for skills for charisma.
And, like,
There's
charisma-
3 kind of branches of
Charisma would also be used in making a good radio show.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of charisma.
We
as you can
don't.
tell.
Yeah.
The
Clearly.
3 branches are kind of bluff, or deception in 5e, which is just lying to people
Lying is fun,
to get out of situations.
especially when you can't in real life.
Diplomacy, or persuasion in 5e. I don't know why they had to change the names.
I don't know.
I get you're trying to be a little separate from old style, but I don't understand.
Basically, convincing people to help you or to not fight to the death.
Right. And then the other one, the big one, is intimidation, or intimidate in 5e. They just shortened it in 5e.
But then they changed it back.
What?
No.
No, I think in 5e it's intimidate. I think I have that wrong.
Drew, you messed up on the planning. What?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What? Drew's not flawless? I'm
is
surprised.
Obviously, intimidating someone, making them be afraid of you and not want to fight you at all. There are a couple other charisma skills. In 3.5, you have a handful of them. You have gather information, which is kind of just going around town and
Being able to get information from people, just like
yeah.
talking.
get information for your next guy you're tracking down or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
There's handle animal, which in 5e is a wisdom skill.
Which we forgot to cover, but
I
it's
forgot
okay.
to cover, but that's okay. I feel like it's more prudent for charisma, in my opinion, because I feel like druids are... I don't remember in 3.5 if they are charisma-based, but in my game, druids are charisma-based, and I feel like that makes more sense in my mind than a wisdom.
I think the reason why they switched druid to wisdom base was so that you can have a character that is great with animals and great in the wilderness, but can't talk to people for the life of them. And I really like the idea of that character, and I want to make one, but I have so many other characters.
But I feel like wisdom would allow you to easily kind of mold yourself into society in some ways and understand the world around you, which I think is a major thing about druids, is that a lot of them don't understand society at all.
Yes, it's great.
I don't know. I prefer charisma druids over wisdom druids.
Just have 22 charisma and 7 wisdom. Sounds like a great character.
Charisma also goes into perform, which is also a thing in 5e. 3.5 and 5e both have performance checks. It's rarely used.
What?
Excuse
me. Bard.
Bards.
Barding boy.
I'm sorry. Yes, you are very correct. Bards use it a lot, but in other situations, you rarely use it.
It's a good like background if you have a performance
Yeah, but it
person.
can be used for a lot of things as well. Like, it can be used for writing and drawing and stuff as well.
And being a gladiator, that's a thing. 5e.
Yeah, it's true.
Gotta find the
3.5
fight pits.
also has use magic device, which is too complicated to really go into right now.
Use a wand.
You know what?
Spelliarmus.
You know what skill? There's an extra skill in 3.5 in the basic layout for it that I never used in my game, and
What?
I didn't even put on here.
What?
There's a use psionic device check, which is like psionics is a weird like mental based magic sort of. And, like, it's totally... I don't know why you wouldn't just make a use magic device check for a situation like that. It's It's too specific.
I don't know why psionics is its own thing.
I understand it in some ways. I mean, the Scion system has always been screwed up. I kind of made it a little easier in our games. But, so, yeah, 5e only has deception, intimidation, and persuasion. And then also performance, like I said, with 3.5. He has bluff, diplomacy, and intimidate, the big three. And then it has something called streetwise, which I guess is like
Gather information?
and stuff. But if you're going to call something streetwise, I feel like it should be wisdom-based.
Should be.
You know?
Oof.
So, first of all, we're going to go like 10 minutes over-ish, but you should
it is
talk.
at the hour, so I'm just going to introduce the station. This is WCCX Waukesha 104.5 FM. This is D&D with Brad and Drew.
We wanted to talk briefly about the ability scores all in general now and how you should build a character. Well, it's going to be different for each class.
Should we do one more? Saves.
Saves?
Saves.
I guess we could talk about saves real quick. First of all, we're not going to go into the different classes much here because we're doing classes next week, or are we doing races next week?
We're doing
classes next week.
Yeah, that's good.
We'll talk about classes next week and what ability scores you should put into each class. But I would say, we'll talk about the ability scores in a minute. But
so saves are when like someone casts a bad spell against you, or there's a trap, or something is there to mess you up, and there's different kinds of saves. In 3.5, there are 4 different kinds of saves. There are 3 different kinds of saves. I forgot how to count. I was thinking 3. I said 4. I can't words, and I'm doing a radio show for some reason. Anyways, so there's 3 different kinds of saves in 3.5. There is fortitude, which is based around constitution. And, like, being able to take poison and
what a fortitude
stuff.
save is essentially trying to save against poisons, diseases, and maybe, like, weather type of damage to you. It's fighting off things inside or around your body, like physical sort of stuff. Then there's reflex saves.
Reflex saves, being able to, like, dodge like fire breath from a dragon, being able to dodge some kind of trap that's springing up against you.
Yeah, reflex saves are more specific than dexterity because you're good at like stealthing doesn't necessarily mean you are good at dodging even a part of a fireball that gets thrown in front of you and emanates in 20-foot area around you. Like that's what reflex saves are for, and those usually only have the damage.
Yeah.
And then the other one is will saves,
which is based off of wisdom, and it keeps your character from becoming like charmed through magical means or being possessed by characters.
Not that any one of your characters has ever been possessed, Brad.
Oh, the flashbacks. Oh boy.
But yeah, it's your mental barrier essentially.
And
5e.
And those were all for 3.5. I'm going to go through 5e because 5e is insane. And they made a save for every single ability score. So strength saves are basically preventing yourself from being knocked down, like keeping your footing. That's basically all that it does. Dexterity saves is almost the same as reflex saves, like dodging magic fireballs and like fire breath, a lot of fire for some reason. Lightning too sometimes. Constitution saves are similar to fortitude saves, preventing yourself from being poisoned or or being petrified sometimes. Then, what's the next one? Intelligence saves. These rarely occur, but intelligence saves kind of prevent you from being confused by illusion spells, which we'll get more into later. Wisdom saves, they're against being possessed and charmed, similar to will saves. And then charisma saves are mainly against being banished to other dimensions, to put it simply.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Which is a little weird.
It is weird.
Intelligence saves and charisma saves don't make a lot of sense to me. What are you... I mean, the intelligence kind of does, is now that you explained that.